Hi everyone, welcome to On the Other Hand. I'm Ariane Zurcher and we are on lesson 14. It is the last lesson of this project. We are finishing up. Don't forget to hit that like button, click on the subscribe button if you haven't already, and tell me how it's going for you. I'm so glad all of you are here and have joined me in making this a variation on a Japanese rice sack. Pull out your sewing machines if they're not out already, because we're going to need them in the construction of our rice sack. I'm going to walk you through it one step at a time. Here we go. Okay, so I have my 4 panels here of linen. I have my cork bottom and I have my 5 pieces of lining, and then I have my 8 rectangular tabs, which I'm going to sew the sides together, turn inside out, press, and then this is going to be put into the seam, and it's where you're going to put your drawstring. So I'm going to start sewing everything together. The first thing I need to do is get my cork bottom, and everything is going to go this way in the form kind of a cross. So that's how it's going to look. So I have 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are going to get sewn, each one to the bottom. I'll press that, and then the side seams get sewn. One of the things I'm experimenting with is testing out how to put these little feet on the bottom. And I just did it with this little scrap of cork. So I'm going to go ahead and try this on my cork square. And I want this in, I have a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, so I want this in, and I think I'm going to do 1.5 inches from either side. And I'm going to put 4 of them in each corner so that it can sit on these little feet. So my first, I'm 1.5 inches in, and that makes it right there. So I'm taking my, anything will do, a nail. I'm using my Appliquick because I use this for everything. And I'm piercing through, and I'm going to pull up like this so that I get a hole. And then I'm going to take one of my little feet, and I'm going to push that through the hole. And I'm going to take my little, whatever this is called, washer, and I'm going to put that here like this, and then I'm going to open this up just like a brad. That's pretty good. I'm going to do that on the 3 remaining corners. All right, so there are my 4 legs, and there it is on this side, and I'm going to go ahead and start sewing these blocks down to my cork bottom. One thing to keep in mind is that this piece, this applique piece, the lighter linen, needs to line up with each other, because I'm going to sew that seam together. I'm going to sew this seam together. And they all have to line up, so make sure you're orienting them in the correct way. This is the bottom. I'm going to get out my sewing machine and I'm going to sew this together. I've just sewn the first seam, and now I'm going to go ahead and do all the others. And this is what it looks like on the back. I've trimmed this foam down a little bit. I have not trued up my linen squares. I'm leaving them. They're a 1/2 inch on the edges as opposed to a 1/4 inch, which is what I have for the cork, and that's why it's coming out. And the reason I'm not trimming them up is because it's hard to really true this up with all of this bulk. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the best I can. And I'm going to sew my next panels on. Okay, so this is how it looks. And now I'm going to sew my side seams. It's going to make a box. And this is how it looks on the other side. All right, so here is my little box so far. I haven't turned it inside. I haven't turned it right side out, but I'm going to do my lining now exactly the same way. I'm going to set it up as a square, sew the bottom part to sew all the sides to the bottom in the shape of a cross. Then I sew my side seams. I'm going to leave one of the side seams open, 5 to 6 inches open, so that I can turn everything inside out once I attach it to my main body. So here's my lining, and I've turned it right side out, and now I've nestled it inside of my linen, and I'm going to take my seams and match them up, pushing the seam allowance to one side. I'm going to clip or pin, whatever you want, and I'm going to do this to all sides, all the corners. Here are my loops. So I just sewed the two pieces together. I've pressed them. I'm now going to turn them like this, and this is going to get pushed down into the middle of each panel, making sure that my lining goes over so that it's sandwiched between the two like this. It's going to get caught in, when I sew this, it's going to get caught in here. I'm going to measure this. I'm going to measure each panel. I'm going to mark center. I'm going to mark center on this, and I'm going to mark center on my lining. I'm going to match everything up, and then I'm going to machine sew. I'm going to sew the whole thing down. And then my opening, which I've left here on this one, I'm going to pull everything out through it, and then I'll sew that bit down as well. All right, I've sewed everything together. I've sewed my lining back together. I've pulled everything out. You could slip stitch this by hand if you don't want to have this machine stitching here. I don't care enough, so I just left it. But if I didn't want that little bump, I could certainly do that. I'm now going to go ahead, and I've clipped this. I find that even though I've cut my lining and everything the same size, that because it's inside of this, and because of the soft and stable creating some thickness here, it just naturally is able to do this. So I am now going to go and I'm going to stitch this down in the ditch here, and on this side it's going to have a row of stitching. And then I'm going to show you how I do my twill tape. This is the twill tape, and I buy it in obviously a huge roll of it. I'm going to take a measure of it, and I'm going to do a running stitch in my silken pearl down the center so that it looks like this. I then stitch the ends, and I made these longer than I need to. This one was sort of a prototype. I was playing with doing loops instead of a single piece of fabric. What I want these ties to be just about what they are here, and then I just knot them. And then when I pull them, it pulls shut. The reason I ended up doing a kind of a gusset instead of loops like this is because with these loops, it tends to pull everything together, and I wanted these sides to stay straighter and just have the corners go in. There's my little faux leather. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to machine stitch this down, and then I'll show you the last bit. Okay, I've sewn this edge down, and you can see on this side, here's my stitching. I've stitched this down. So I have my twill tape, and I have the same length in my silken pearl because I don't want to have to stop in the middle. I want to be able to do the running stitch with one length of thread. I'm going to come up here right in the middle, and I'm going to actually do a little group of stitches because I don't want to do a knot right here. I'm going to do just a series of little stitches close together, right next to each other. And now I'm just going to go right down the center, doing my little running stitch. I'm going to keep this fairly, I was going to say small, but it's really not that small. I could also do a running stitch along the edge so that I had 3, or just 2 on either edge, or just 1 down the middle. I'm using a sashiko needle. I have threaded this with a safety pin, and I'm going to go ahead and thread this through. Now, I want each one to start in the opposite end. So if I'm going to start this one here, the other one is going to start here. So I'm just going to thread this through. I'm going to thread this through all 4 of these. It's going to go all the way around. Here are my ends. So I'm going to tie a tiny little knot. I want to make sure these are not twisting. I'm going to tie a little knot here. Now I can put tassels on this if I want, whatever. There it is. That's the one side. And now I'm going to start on this side, just directly opposite, and I'm going to thread my other one. But I'm going to use a different color silk and pearl and do a running stitch with a different color. Perhaps I will do one of these. All right, so there's the bottom of my bag. So it's little feet. There's the side. One more panel. There's the other side. Another panel. And there we go. So there's my little sack. I've got my 2 ties here, different colored ribbons. And when I open it up, it stands really nicely all by itself. So these were all inspired, and now I'm going to show you by my rock gardens. These are all photographs of different rock gardens. And this was my inspiration. This. Each one represents a little rock garden. I wanted this to be able to stand on its own, so that if you didn't want to do the gussets and the drawstring, you wouldn't have to. You could just make a carrying storage bin, but that if you did want to, you could also have it be a little sack. So that's it. We've finished. You have a little rice sack or a little storage bin for your project, whatever you've decided to use it for. Thank you so much for coming with me on this little adventure. It's been a lot of fun. Don't forget to hit that like button. Click on the subscribe button if you haven't already, so you don't miss the next project or any of my stitching videos. Please remember that if you haven't started yet and you've just binge watched through all of these lessons to see what's going on and how it's put together, everybody gets to work at their own pace. The most important thing is to have fun. If it's not fun, pull back, reassess, take your time. This should be fun. Until next time, here's to stitching together.